All right, let's look at another game by the great attacking player, Alexander Alekhine. This was an exhibition game, possibly a simultaneous display, and it caught my eye because it's a really fascinating miniature. Alekhine had black, and his opponent played e4. He played e5, knight f3, knight d6, sorry, so we have a Philidor defense. And now bishop c4. Here, Alekhine played knight c6. Knight f6, probably more common there. And now white decides to play very aggressively. Simply castle 0-0, or maybe d4 would be logical, but white plays this move c3, which has a lot of venom. The plan is to bring the queen to b3 and create an attack on f7 almost immediately. So Alekhine plays bishop g4. It's an interesting move because in order to justify this move, he must have seen a lot of tactics. After queen b3, pressuring f7, queen d7 is played. And now white decides to play knight g5, bringing another piece to the attack. The immediate capture on f7 with bx f7, queen takes f7, queen takes b7 poses some interesting problems. The queen attacking the knight and the rook at once would force black's hand here to play king d7. But after queen takes rook, black gets a very quick counterattack, starting with bx f3. gx f3, qx f3, and now the queen is hitting the rook and the pawn on e4 at once. A possible move here for white might be something like castles, but let's say if he were to play rook g1 with the idea of trying to activate this rook on the open file, now queen takes e4 would set up some interesting tactical ideas. If the king were to try to run in this direction, simply knight f6, very strong move, developing, leaving this queen in danger of being trapped after something like rook g8 and bishop e7. However, black could also probe white a little bit with the move queen f3, just to see where the king runs. Here the king has to return to e1 to repeat the position. King c2 would not be possible. See if you can spot why. Yeah, this arrow is a big hint. The queen on a8 is targeted by the queen on f3. So knight b4 check or knight d4 check, either one, would grab white's queen. And for that reason, white would have to simply repeat here, going back to e1 and allowing something like knight f6 simply developing, and black's pieces would be overwhelming white's defenses. And so in the game here, instead of bx f7, white brought another piece to the attack with knight g5. Alekhine now defends the weak point on f7 with his knight playing knight h6. Here, for white, probably a better move. After knight h6. A better move that white could have played than in the game now is probably something like queen takes b7. And after rook b8, queen a6, black could develop with bishop e7 and argue that his superior development is compensation for the pawn. That's not clear to me, but that's what Alekhine said in his notes. This looks this looks a little messy, and it looks like white still has plenty of attacking ideas. Although, okay, clearly black does have superior development. But instead of queen takes b7, his opponent decided to take on f7. And after knight takes, queen takes b7 was played in this position. As in the previous line, the queen is hitting the rook and the knight, which forces black's hand to play king d7 holding the knight, but losing the rook. Here, there's no knight on f3, so bx f3, gx f3, queen takes f3 is not possible, but the queen can zoom to c4, creating mate threats against white's king. Here, white played f3. I think the only move to parry the mate threat. And now, an interesting decision. A lot of players would likely retreat the bishop, maybe bishop e6 or bishop h5, but Alekhine simply gives the bishop away, bx f3. And here, after pawn takes, the important detail is that the pawn on g3 doesn't exist anymore, so it's unable to play g3 to block this diagonal. That'll be relevant in just a couple moves. The follow-up here is knight d4, renewing the mate threat on e2 and putting pressure against this bishop on c1. For instance, if c takes d4, then queen takes rook, and when the king steps forward, queen takes bishop. When the king steps forward, queen takes rook is possible. White did not want to go down that road and tried to slow down black's attack with d3. It's a logical looking move because it avoids that variation, but it actually loses. The best that white could have hoped for was the previous variation, but here after queen takes d3 and now c takes d4, Alekhine has a move that could cause resignation. See if you can spot the move. Bishop e7 here. It does a couple things. It threatens the queen, but more importantly, it threatens bishop h4 checkmate. His opponent played queen takes rook, which is basically the same thing as resigning, because after bh4, it's mate. I really liked this game. I thought there were a lot of very interesting sidelines, and Alekhine, he must have been very familiar with a lot of these patterns, because in order to justify bishop g4 in the opening, you sort of have to be familiar with some of these. All right, I really enjoyed this game. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well.